So Film Row, in and of itself, existed in a weird place in Oklahoma City history. So Oklahoma City went through a lot of interesting transitions of its own. In the 1950s, the city introduced something called the pay plan, right, which we know historically as urban renewal, right, and that was the idea behind that. And the idea with this plan was that they were going to create a utopia of sorts. I mean, that was kind of the weird thing at the time, right? But by the time, because governments move slow, by the time that this was instituted, right, and they began the literal tearing down of these spaces, right, I believe it was almost 400 or just over 400 acres of downtown was absolutely obliterated, right? The proverbial bottom of the barrel in Oklahoma City's economy dropped out. Through urban renewal, that wrecking ball literally, right, stopped just down the street right at the edge of Film Row because the city ran out of money. So that's the only reason why it's still standing, that to be said. Because of that economic downturn, especially in downtown, this particular area changed dramatically. It wasn't really being utilized. Most of the space would become empty, vacant, right? And what was once known as Film Row earned a new moniker known as Skid Row. I got involved in Oklahoma's film industry in 1998, working as a police officer. I was hired to drive around a Japanese TV crew. And through that experience, I began to kind of get to know other people in Oklahoma who were doing filmmaking things. And it was not a popular medium. I mean, nobody knew about it. So in 2003, I started the Oklahoma Film Society to try and bring people together. And through the course of meeting these folks in groups for the first time and really having discussions, I felt that one of the things that they needed was the space in order to do the business of filmmaking, right? So I was thinking like studio space, because it's always been a thing. Gosh, if we only had a studio to film in, right? And so I began looking around at old schools, gymnasiums, things like that, and driving around the city. And then I came across an interesting article from a magazine called Slice. And they had an article about a business down here called the Oklahoma Film Supply Company. And I thought, what? And then in the article, it talks about Film Exchange, Film Row, right? And it was a very short article. And I'm like, I've driven through that area tons of times. I don't know what they're talking about. So I came down here and I began to see in these blighted buildings, the evidence of that, across the street, the Film Exchange marquee, those kinds of things. And this particular area, there wasn't anything planned for it at all, right? This is Skid Row. Nobody looked this direction, right? So when I started delving in and looking at the history, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And seeing how many of these buildings were vacant, right? This could be a cool space to, create those set offices, right? But I did approach the city. Robbie Kinzel, she's passed away since then, was a really great believer in the vision, right? And so we had the right people at the right time in the right place. And we got really, really fortunate that everybody we talked to, they just got it. It was immediate. Nobody ever looked at us and said, are you freaking crazy, right? They all believed that there could be something more here. I didn't have the ability to physically or financially invest in anything here. I wish I could have. But I was a great advocate. I had the ability to communicate, whatever medium it was, whether it's printed, email, letters, phone calls, whatever. We managed to pull in the right people from the city and people who were interested, and then we got really fortunate and came across some angel investors. And one of them, his name is Chip Fudge. And Chip believed in the vision right away. And so in a very quick period of time, that one building became a district concept. As the area began to develop, I was down here photographing everything along the way. Started with film camera, right? And eventually, thank God, cell phones got better, right? I started using digital cameras and whatnot. And by the time the book came out, I had over 5,000 digital images of this area's development. And seeing that rebirth was a really cool thing to me, because when I walked this place in 2003, you just can't imagine how bad was. It was a ghost town. I mean, people even have kind of avoided it except at the rush hour to get on the highway. I mean, nothing was alive down here. And I always told myself that I would know it worked when there was a particular building with its doors open, because it had been sealed up for a long time. So when these renovations kind of started, they started off a little slow, and then they kind of sped up. And one night I was driving through, it was the early evening, I was just passing, they were not even coming down here, it was going downtown for something else. And I slammed on the brakes. The doors were open. That was really cool to see. Because there was a lot of time spent in trying to see that vision through. I'm surprised how emotional I got about that. You know, when you work on something really hard like that, and you see something come to life. And they were getting ready, they opened up, there were electricians working in that space, and they were connecting the lights. And I don't know how long those lights had been working, you know. But in that particular space, it was all steel, the original Art Deco, you know, light fixtures and fire pools and all that kind of stuff, because the space had just been sealed up. It had been that way for a very long time, and that was that space. I'd always imagined if that space were opened, then I knew that we were doing something. So when I was walking these streets through all of that and the renovations and such, one of the interesting things for me, because I was writing the book at the time, I had the unique opportunity of being able to see what it looked like before. I had a really good sense of what had once been here. So when I walked down these streets, it was cool because I saw, as I walked, I could see what once was, what it is, and I had a vision of what it was becoming. Today, when I walk down the streets, I still have that, but I see things that I never could have imagined. Oklahoma City's history in and of itself is pretty unique. And I think that we as citizens of this city have a certain responsibility to know that history, right? To better understand our town, right? Because we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And although they may not have intended to leave behind a legacy, they did. In this space, this building, Film Row in and of itself, is just one small part of a much bigger legacy. But it is a legacy. And I feel really fortunate and honored to be a part of that story and to know that people are now standing on the work that we did and creating something new, just like this space will become something new